Controversy in Brisbane as the Lions march towards September. The Giants upstage the Pies without 4 of their best players, and Richmond's Twin Towers send an ominous warning to the rest of the competition. This is the round so far, presented by KO and Kane Corns. We sit here tonight. The Lions are in second spot on the table. A nail-biting last quarter tonight against the Roos, but they prevail, and it all started with this free kick in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, the umpires have had a shocking round, to be honest. This one here against McInerney's gone to Ben Brown. So you can see it here. Look at the scores. This is an important stage of the game. Clearly, Brown goes back and slots this. I'm just not sure why that's a free kick. You're allowed to do that in the ruck contest. You're allowed to use some body, and that is just genuine ruck craft that he was penalised for. Ben Brown goes back and kicks it, but that wasn't the only controversial one.
It wasn't. Pretty tense few final minutes here. The Roos clearing it. Daniel Rich in his 200th game goes back and slots this, puts the Lions back in front. It goes back and forth for the last few minutes. This is, of course, the Roos. Probably their last chance to keep in touch with the finals. Jared Pollock puts this forward and Taran Thomas kicks an important goal.
Yeah, not sure how he just bobs up on his own in the goal square, Taran Thomas. From there, you thought North Melbourne were going to pull off a pretty outstanding win. Then we get this one here against Scott Thompson. From that man again, McInerney. And once again, it's a really poor free kick. You'd be filthy if this cost you a big final. Well, it's cost North Melbourne a big game, but even more so a big final. That's genuine bodywork in the marking contest. McInerney's put some mayo on it and not staged, but he certainly exaggerated contact there. The umpire's fallen for it, and you get that result.
Rhys Shaw said after the game that he didn't quite understand the free kick, said there was nothing he could do about it now. But as you said, a loss for the Roos, and one they could quite easily have won. Mel Horsey, social media lit up with this pretty strong after the game.
It did indeed. Social media actually went into meltdown after that free kick. Lee Fisher was the umpire that paid it, and his name was trending around the country on Twitter quickly after the match. So plenty of people reacting to it, including several players. Patrick Dangerfield, he took to Twitter. He just let a pretty classic meme do the talking. Demon Stephen May, he let some emojis do the talking with just a few face palms. And former Bulldog Liam Picken, he said, harsh decision, great bodywork. So, boys, lots of people sharing their reactions, and I don't think we've heard the end of it. I'll keep an eye on it all across the weekend.
Just makes it really hard to be a modern defender. Now,
yeah.
You can't chop the arms. There's not much contact you can have, and then you can't use your body in a show of strength in the marking contest. And umpires have got to be better than that, because they reward that action and the exaggeration of contact. Players will keep doing it. So the umpire's got to make a stance and, no, you exaggerated that. I could see it. That was a mark.
The Saturday star came out of this game. It was none other than Brisbane Lion, Jared Lyons. He was playing for Gold Coast last year. Somehow ended up at the Lions as a delisted free agent in the off-season. He was dominant tonight.
Well, he's hot, isn't he? He had 10 coaches' votes last week against Port Adelaide as the best player on the ground. He'll get 10 again tonight. His numbers were extraordinary again. 30 disposals, 23 of those were contested. This is late in the game as well. A really significant and pivotal contested mark there. And his work around stoppage, 13 clearances and 2 goals tonight. I just find he's really easing the burden on Lachie Neale as well. I mean, Neale's been solid the last 2 weeks, 24 disposals in each of those games, but he certainly hasn't been the standout player that he was at the start of the year in Brisbane, and no longer relying on the work of Lachie Neale. So that's been a big win for them.
Pretty handy 1-2 punch. They sit second on the table now. Every chance to host a home qualifying final. You said in round 11 they could win it. How close is that now? Do we think they're in the top couple of premiership contenders?
Well, the ladder says they are, and that's the best measure of any side. So the top 4 is going to be vital for them. You'd think they'd tick that off. Top 2 even more so. So if they finish top 2, they're a very good chance not to have to come to the MCG until the biggest day, which would be an unbelievable story. They won 5 games last year. 5 games. They won 1 until the bye, and they're sitting second. 1 game off Geelong. If Geelong lose tomorrow, which they may, they're 1 game off top spot.
Crazy stuff. It was an absolute thriller in the West as well. Fremantle up against Sydney. It was a bit of a grind in the last couple of minutes. How about this one? And we start here with scores level. The Swans going 1 point up, all thanks to Luke Parker.
Yeah, Saturday night games delivered in terms of the thrillers and how close they were. Looked a really nice kick off the boot from Parker. Drifted wide for a point. You can see the clock, 2 minutes 30 to go. Dockers take it down. Really good marking from Hamling. He was sensational all night. Just had a brilliant performance. Still underrated. Take it in, and eventually your man Langdon kicks a point, and they go 1 point up with 1 minute 30 to go, and there was more drama to play out after this.
pretty low-scoring game. We thought the Dockers' decision to play Darcy, Lobb and Sandilands might have come back to bite them. This one should have been holding the ball, though.
Absolutely, yeah. Umpires called for a throw. They do tend to put the whistles away and not pay those ones in the last stage. That should have been holding the ball. I'm not sure how Sydney don't get that through for a point to get a draw, but anyway, some terrific efforts from the Fremantle defenders who were desperate. They hold on. Look, the game was nothing to write home about, but at least we got a thrilling finish. And Fremantle and Sydney are not going to do any damage in September, despite the Dockers being just one game outside the 8. But
only one game out, though, and fair bit of percentage, though.
No, they're not good enough to even be spoken about in that conversation. They're averaging 56 points in their last 5 weeks.
Yeah.
So they've got to find a way to score more. Once again, 52 points against probably any other side in the competition bar Sydney with the way they play isn't going to get you the result. So they shouldn't let the paper over the wall cracks because of that performance.
You spoke about handling being important. Rory Lobb was close to their best on ground. He was holding his left elbow after the game, so we'll see how important that is. They can ill afford to lose him for the rest of the season. Now we go to Giants Stadium next. They entered without Ward, Cornelio, Kelly and Phil Davis, which meant Toby Green captain today. And who would have thought they'd prevail in such a big upset over the Pies?
It was just a first quarter blitz, 8 goals to 1 in the first quarter, and it was the forwards that got the damage done. Finlayson coming back in the side, Cameron will speak about in a minute, but also Himmelberg. So they just had an absolute field day with that. 6 to Cameron, 4 to Himmelberg, and 3 to Finlayson as well. It was the speed of entry and how clean they were going forward. So they had far less entries, but six marks inside 50 just in the first quarter alone. So the undersized Collingwood defence, without the likes of Moore, who did his hammy last week, were clearly exposed by 3 of the best forward combinations in the game. I think Finlayson, Cameron and Himmelberg, when they're up and running, very hard for anyone to stop. And you can see the panic there from Howe, who was clearly undersized, trying to play on Cameron.
Is it going to work, the 3 Giants forwards? Because it showed today that can.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because I think they're all mobile. I think Jeremy Cameron, at his best, is the best player in the competition. I know he's got his ups and downs, and he has had that, and sometimes he looks lethargic off the ball, but when he plays like he did today, gets up the ground and then resets as a forward and really gets back inside 50. So 20 disposals, he had 6 goals, 8 inside 50, so he's up the ground winning his footy and then delivering it. It's a beautiful field kick and 9 marks. I mean, give me those numbers. That's one of the individual performances of the season, and when he's on, best player in the competition for me.
And Toby Green showed that he can be a midfielder as well, not just a stay-at-home forward. Now, you put this on the radar last week with Mason Cox and the dysfunctional Pies forward line. They had more inside 50s today, 14 more than the Giants, and they couldn't kick a winning score.
Despite the win last week against West Coast, we spoke about this last week and just how predictable they are going forward. You and I watched these entries in the production meet. We could have shown 40 of these entries, and we've just plucked out a few, but this is how predictable Collingwood are. See if you can see a theme here when you watch this vision. It is all long, top of the goal square, high balls inside 50, and the opposition know it's coming. If it's not going to Cox, it's going to undersized forwards like Myercheck, and it's just far too easy for good defences to pick it off like the Giants did today. So they've got to be more unpredictable when they take the ball inside 50. They got big worries in their forward line, in particular Mason Cox. I know Nathan Buckley's been very loyal and patient with him, and he was okay last week, but he's sadly out of form, and he's far too easy to play against.
They're missing Stevenson as well, and they're in danger now of missing the top 4 of the Pies, so that's a big watch. Richmond next week, we'll get to that in just a moment. We couldn't leave this mark out, though, Jeremy Howe. He takes them week after week. Bit of a theme coming up. He seems to take these in Collingwood losses, Jeremy Howe.
Does he really?
That's what they're telling us.
That wasn't the only one. He took a nice one at the other end as well, but he's the best aerialist in the game.
Now, Richmond's key forwards today, Tom Lynch and Jack Riewoldt. Their 5th game together. They're getting better by the week. They're going to take on that Collingwood defence next week. How about these two? 6 goals together and really put the Port Adelaide defence to the sword.
This would be really exciting for Damien Hardwick and all Richmond fans, because this is the best I've seen these two function. It hasn't been a big sample size, has it? Just the 5 games you just said, but it's funny they've won 4 and only lost 1 when these two played together. So what I did like is their ability to share the space. They didn't get in each other's row. You see Lynch up the ground here and then delivering to Riewoldt, who marks on the undersized Houston. So they've clearly got a pretty good understanding already together. That's only going to get stronger in the next 5 weeks before finals. And Lynch he's kicked more goals, I should say, for Richmond, but he hasn't had as big an influence as he had today. And we're going to see this coming up very shortly. This one here, this is what gets you excited. That's what he did as captain at the Gold Coast, and that's what leaders do. So that was a phenomenal effort, and 19 disposals, 3 goals, and 7 contested marks between Lynch and Revolt. It's alarming for the rest of the comp.
The power are never really in this. Xavier Dursum gave them a glimmer of hope late in the game. How about this one? He kicks it from the pocket in the set shot, then sets off on the arrow. It's had a few mixed emotions today. What do you make of it? And Ken Higley said he may have to reconsider when he does choose to do this.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I like it. I think we can get on players for doing things like this. I mean, 2 Richmond players, Sydney Stack and Rioli, did like a lightsaber little celebration and then bowed at each other. So if I know, but if they'd lost, we'd be talking about it. So if Dursum, if they're 3 goals down and we go and win, we're not talking about it. So I think we react. The Crows players were laughing at 3/4 time in their huddle. They lost. But Essendon were laughing before the game in their huddle and they won. And then we don't talk about it. So I like a bit of personality. I think the way Ken spoke about it after the game was pretty balanced. And he'll have a chat to him. And he's a young kid who's had a very, very good season and he'll learn from it.
There is bigger issues for the Power. They're out of the top 8 now and in a 8 wins for the season. They're going to need to win at least 3 of these, maybe 4 to make it. How many of these are you giving them? Yeah,
maybe 2 if they're lucky. But this was, I think last week really broke the back of Port Adelaide and took the heart out of their performances up and down so much this year. And to come into a red-hot Richmond away from home, they were never, ever going to win today. Didn't look like it. They won't start favourites against the Giants next week. And it's going to be a disappointed, wasted season.
They lost the last 4 last year to miss the finals. Are we going to feel pressure for the coach?
Oh, there's pressure there, but he's contracted until the end of 2021, so you're not going to move on the coach now.
One man without a contract for next year is David Teague. He's gone 4 out of 6 at the helm of the Blues since takeover from Brendan Bolton. They almost got 100 points today at Melville Stadium, and this one really went to script against the Suns.
Yeah, I think I like about Carlton is, as a Carlton fan, you can now come to a game with something to really look forward to. So your veterans are playing well, and your young players are playing well. I mean, look at the crowd there. Really solid crowd for a game against a low-drawing side like the Gold Coast. And you know they're going to be attacking, they're going to be entertaining, and they're going to kick a high score. So win, lose or draw, they have a crack, and there's some significant highlights for them. So I've really enjoyed the back half of the season for Carlton, and the Blues fans needed something to celebrate, and they've got it.
Stephen Coniglio has still got a decision to make. Has he seen much in the last 6 weeks that may have swayed his decision if you were in his shoes to maybe pick the Blues?
If I was a player, I'd have no worries going to Carlton. The only worry I'd have is who's the coach. As a player who's going to sign a significant contract like Coniglio, I want to know who's coaching me. But in terms of their list, how healthy the club is off the field, big Victorian club with great history, no worries at all signing there.
The Blues moved up to 16th after this one. That means the Crows now have picked 3. It seems to keep bumping up and up, and the Crows take on the Blues next week. It's going to be a big one. They were no good last night against the Essendon Footy Club. Sard and McKenna dominated off half-back, generated 13 of their 15 goals out of the back half. And the Crows, they looked a bit sluggish.
Yeah, name a better duo off half-back than these two. So there's McKenna. He was extraordinary. Just it's not arrogance, but the boldness of him to take on 2 Crows players there and make them look completely pedestrian. Then you got Sard, who completely blanketed Eddie Betts. Now, Sard's record against the game's best small forwards this year has been unbelievable, and it's not just his defensive capabilities. When he gets it, he's so damaging. So these two, I thought, clearly one of the 2 best players on the ground, and there's Sard again just spoiling Eddie Betts. So we'll speak about Adelaide in a moment. They knew this was going to be coming, and they knew the speed would challenge
them. How about that?
Unbelievable. I mean, you can't teach that, and you can't stop it. I mean, how unpredictable. Seen it do him twice this year, and that just completely fooled Lockie Murphy there, and around he goes, and off they go. But for me, that was as good as a win as any team in the comp this year. When you look at who was out, they had no ruckman. Hurley's not there. Fantasia, reigning best and fairest, Devon Smith, under pressure away from home, and they do that and kick the last 12 out of 15 goals. Unbelievable win. It's
a big hiccup for the Crows. Their chance to really solidify their spot in the top 8, and they're now in a fight. This is who they've beaten this year. In regards to, apart from Giants and Tigers down the bottom, they haven't beaten much.
No, and if you take the 2 Suns games out, where they've won by a combined 165 points, it's looking very ugly for Adelaide. And since that 2017 grand final loss, I think they're 21-17, which is about 10th in the competition. They're a mediocre football side, and I certainly overestimated their capabilities this year, as I think a lot of so-called experts in the media did, and fans. But they're very mediocre and ordinary. And the worry for them is their age. I mean, they're the oldest team to play in round 18 and they're average. So they've got some big decisions to make. I mean, Eddie Betts, we've loved him. Looks like the end is coming very, very fast for him.
He's got a year to run.
As is Taylor Walker, who looks like he's completely finished and can't move from side to side. So he's the captain of the club, and you've got to make a decision about him for the next 5 weeks. Do you send him back to the sample like
There's no way they're dropping
did?
Tex.
Well, on form they should. So if they don't, the only reason they're not is because he's captain.
Okay. Fascinating game next week, Crows and Blues. You can catch that on KO. KO lets you instantly stream over 50 sports, including every match of every round of the 2019 Toyota AFL Premiership season. You can stream all of Sunday's matches with Geelong taking on Hawthorn, Melbourne up against West Coast and St Kilda hosting the Western Bulldogs. Plus catch up quickly on any match you miss with KO's Key Moments feature, allowing you to easily find all the best goals from every match. Among those 50 sports, Kane is the British Open. Can't wait to see how
Who's
those
gonna
final...
win?
Oh, Cam Smith.
Is he? What, the rugby league player?
Oh, the rising Australian golfer.
Just tricky.
He's on the rise. Those games tomorrow, Hawthorn and Geelong, is fascinating. The Cats have the chance to continue their lead. And then the big game, Melbourne against West Coast, and a big chance for the Eagles in Alice Springs.
Well, I would have penciled that one in the AFL for a blockbuster in Alice Springs before the season started. But what a shocker it's been for Melbourne. We know that. Hopefully they rebound next year. And St Kilda, for the first time under Brett Ratton. Let's see if they can upset the Dogs.
The Dogs have a chance. If they win that, they're even with 8th. So we'll see how that unfolds at Marvel Stadium. To the ladder now, Brisbane in second, as we mentioned. West Coast have a chance to leapfrog them tomorrow. And then from there, Collingwood and Richmond is looming as a big one next week.
Yep, no, and then it's probably set, isn't it, really, in terms of the top 8. Adelaide just hanging in. Maybe the Western Bulldogs are the only team that can knock Adelaide off, but I think the top 8 is pretty much set. Carlton
continue to rise. If they win next week, they might jump over St Kilda and keep pushing that Crows kick down.
Big game at the MCG next week against the Crows, so they may start favourites against Adelaide, which would be huge.
It would be. One more thing today, nothing is going right for the Gold Coast this year. Their 13th consecutive loss. They can't even take a trick with their own teammates.
Yeah, how about this? Well, they're punching each other in the head. Poor old Michael Rischkatelli cops one here from the young fella King who's trying to get his opponent off him and whack, cop that. Not what you need after being smashed for the last 11 weeks.
And it looks like they're getting the wooden spoon as well.
Yep.
Thanks, Kane.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mel Horsey.
Thanks, boys.
We'll see you same time, same place here on The Round so far next week.